This is the most complete list of muscle car types ever created. I've spent a month researching the history and features for each of these types. We're not talking brands or models, but the different categories. In this video, I'll explain the advantages and disadvantages of all 12 so you can decide which muscle car style is best for you. The 12th muscle car variety is really rare and can be super cool, but it's also a warning to potential buyers as it may not be right for everyone. Let's start with probably the most popular current muscle car trend, Pro Touring. In the 90s, new cars were starting to increase performance levels. You could get a Camaro with 330 horsepower, a Vet with 345, which weighed less than 3,300 pounds, and the V10 Dodge Viper had 415 horsepower. Many classic car owners wanted to step up their mods to try and match this new level of performance, and not just with acceleration, but with much improved handling and braking too. Owners started adding these 8 key features to a Pro Touring build. Larger diameter and much wider wheels and performance tires. In the 60s, wheel widths were 6 inches. These builds have wheels that are 9 to 10 inches wide in the front and 10 to 13 inches wide in the rear. By stepping up to taller and wider wheels, owners could add super sticky new technology performance tires. Number 2, big power, over 400 horsepower and up to over 1,000 horsepower. Number 3, Pro Touring cars should have a lowered stance. Lowering 2 to 3 inches is required. Number 4, dramatically upgraded large diameter brakes, 13 plus inches with aluminum calipers, often pulled from newer cars. Number 5, suspension systems were also dialed up to make use of those tires in the handling department. Number 6, we saw faster and tighter and more responsive steering boxes and steering racks with less power assist too for better steering feel and turn-in. 7, owners upgraded to modern 5 and 6-speed manual transmissions, with auto transmissions going from 4 to 6 to even 8 and 10 speeds, with some doing 5th gen LT swaps. These lower first gear ratios and super tall overdrive ratios meant faster off-the-line acceleration, better miles per gallon, and less RPM at highway speeds. 8, we also see people are adding more styling features inside and out, which is sure a negative for some. A Pro Touring vehicle is designed to be driven hard, not just driven to the car show on Sundays. It can be a daily driver, drag racer, or tracked. And don't confuse Pro Touring with Pro Street. They are very different. We'll get to that soon. Pro Touring sacrifices comfort, noise, and your wallet to get that performance. Still, I kind of want a Pro Touring Pantera. Is that weird? It's not a Resto Mod either. In many ways, Pro Touring, though, represents the evolution of the Resto Mod, which we'll also get to in a moment. I want to make one very important comment about Pro Touring versus modern performance cars like a 2024 Mustang 5.0. Modern cars have more supple and tuned suspensions that can perform and have rides that are more compliant and forgiving. Autocross and track racing usually means a very flat race surface, which allows for super stiff suspensions. If you are considering a Pro Touring chassis, just know that the ride can be pretty stiff and uncomfortable, and it won't handle rough roads like a modern car. It will be bouncing around a bit. There's also definitely a more hardcore track version of Pro Touring, and you'll also hear G-Machine and Street Fighter names. Those tend to be for cars that are even more raw, like no AC, no cup holders, or other creature comforts. A sleeper is a plain-looking, unassuming car that, by its mild appearance, doesn't look fast, but is. It intentionally looks to be ordinary, beat up, or even ugly. Looks like a daily driver, plain Jane model, or even an economy class car. They often have boring colors like tan, beige, faded green, or off-white. A sleeper will never have a wing, or spoilers, or even aftermarket wheels. And bonus points if the car even appears dilapidated, like it has somehow been neglected for many years. The sleeper term comes from the term sleeper agent, a secret spy who lays low and only acts when called upon. Sleepers have been popular for illegal stoplight drags, especially when betting money. That's why they don't call attention to themselves. The only giveaway may be wider tires or a somewhat hidden turbo intercooler. There were also factory-made sleepers back in the 60s, and modern ones too, like the Chevy SS and GTO are pretty good examples. The ultimate sleeper looks stock even in the engine bay or under the chassis. It hides ported heads, a wild but not lopey cam, shorter gearing, and often hidden nitrous. Aftermarket parts are even sometimes modified to look stock. And of course, a quiet exhaust is crucial. Sleepers are great for those who want to drive fast but avoid speeding tickets, all the while being period correct and maintaining that vintage look. But just know that your non-car friends won't get it at all and will wonder why you drive around in a boring old crappy-looking car. Number 3, Resto Mod. It's a combination of the words restoration and modification. Almost everyone can agree that the old muscle cars look cool, but oftentimes they don't drive that well. Floaty farm wagon suspensions, drum brakes that either barely work or lock up completely, and over-assisted sloppy power steering systems. Cars of the 50s, 60s, and 70s kind of suck to drive. And believe me, I know how bad they suck. I daily drove my 68 Camaro for 9 years in my teens and 20s. And I'm sure my baby boomer viewers who drove one back in the day and then got back into one recently after a 20 to 30 year break can agree they are not as good as you remember and leave a lot to be desired. Resto modding aims to address many of these classic car issues. Resto mods tend to be modified, but not necessarily so much for speed and handling as much for drivability, comfort, and styling. A resto mod typically has more simple bolt-on mods than a pro touring car. Wheels may tend to be narrower and more flashy, less performance-oriented, maybe even chrome for some reason. Better tires, but not really performance tires, but maybe a few power adders or even an overdrive transmission. You may even see a custom or more modern centered console with cup holders, please no, and other convenience features, or aftermarket style headlights or taillights. It's a bit of a gray area when a resto mod becomes pro touring car, but I think it's the lowered stance, tire width, brake and chassis upgrades, and big power of the pro touring car that differentiates them. Number 4, showroom stock. This is how the car was when it was bought right off the dealer's showroom floor. These vehicles have been restored according to how they were originally built. It's all about preserving and appreciating things the way they were back then. Original specs, brakes, all original interior, stock ride height, everything. And only painted in factory colors for that model and year. These cars include stock wheels and period correct bias ply tires, original electrical systems complete with dim yellow headlights, some cases 4-wheel non-power drum brakes, non-overdrive transmissions for loud and efficient freeway cruising, a finicky carburetor that never really seems to work 100% correctly, and hardcore restorers even get over the top with original style batteries, paint markings on certain parts like the factory used to do, redone tags on the front coil springs, all the way down to the correct hose clamps. Some are even aware that different manufacturing plants had different build techniques, and perfect 100-point cars will reflect these differences. These builds are great for those of us who want to own the exact car we've always dreamed of, or to relive our youth in a car that we used to have. And for those of us too young to have these cars back in the day, we can get a feel for what it was like. It's all about timeless style. A showroom stock car will always look good, will always look right. I can totally appreciate this style. Number 5, Survivor. A Survivor is an unrestored car that has made it from its original date of manufacture all the way to the present day without any paintwork, mechanical updates, or restoration of any kind. A car so original that should never even be restored, where restoring it could actually decrease its value. These cars are often just well-maintained single owner or two owner cars, or perhaps one that has been stored away for decades. These are the legendary barn finds. A Survivor car is almost completely original, trim, paint, full numbers matching, but in still good enough shape to be driven regularly. Patina is standard and is legit with decades of added character. Of course, tires, batteries, wipers, and other small items may have been replaced, and a Survivor does not have to be a rare or special car either. It just has to be original. One of the downsides of these cars, though, is they may not be the best to drive or even safe to drive. But for those who love originality and want to preserve the past, these can be amazing to own, a legacy for future generations. There are 3 great things about a Pro Street car. They have in-your-face looks and the performance to back it up. They are the fastest in a straight line, and they terrify children and the elderly. But 3 downsides of a Pro Street car are, it is incapable of turning, even a little. The pizza cutter front tires means horrible braking, and they terrify children and the elderly. Pro Street has its origins in the 70s with a street-legal drag look that gained peak popularity in the 80s. These cars were built to imitate the NHRA Pro Stock drag class of the 70s. Pro Street are more at home on the drag strip than the street, but are still based on actual production car bodies and are in fact street legal. They also usually have somewhat complete interiors, unlike a full drag race car. These cars are always tubbed, meaning the rear bodywork has been gutted to allow for super wide rear tires. Again, they must be tubbed, not mini tubbed like a Pro Touring car. A true Pro Street rig will have 14-inch wide illegal drag tires in the rear, with huge 5-inch sidewalls, and equally as dangerous on the street pizza cutter tires in the front, which are theoretically used for weight reduction, low rolling resistance, and less wind resistance in drag racing. To fit the massive tires, the rear axle tubes are narrowed. A highly modified big block provides the most street cred, especially with a Roots Type 671 or 871 blower poking through the hood. This is really the signature of a great pro street car. They should also have a roll bar, and don't forget the wheelie bars because these owners actually go to the racetrack. Number 7, Street Machine Retro Awesomeness. Some of you millennials may not even know this one, but ask your boomer dad, friends, or neighbors. This was big in the 70s. The first question you may ask is, why so high in the rear, or jacked up as it was called? One theory is the owners wanted a wide rear tire, and this was the easiest way to get it. Spacers and shackle extensions in the rear to add lift, and then inflatable air shocks to go even higher. Then throw on some wide chrome reverse wheels with M&H Racemaster tires. Another theory was these owners were trying to imitate the drag racing funny cars of the day. But these cars also had crazy accessories too, like hood scoops, side pipes, rear window louvers, flake paint. Drivers used to air up the rear shocks high for normal driving and then go super high when they were cruising the street. Jacking up the rear made the suspension super stiff and totally changed the suspension geometry. This meant the car was almost impossible to hook up and get traction. At the time, most people didn't care what was done with these cars because they were not so popular in the 70s due to the gas crisis. And some of you older guys who can't understand the pro touring trend today or some of the other modifications you're seeing, please remember that it was you or maybe your friends who were doing this to your cars back in the day. So just relax. People mod their cars, always have, always will, for better or for worse. I personally love this 70s trend. It's so ridiculous. We need this trend to come back. A clone is a car that has been modified to look like a higher trim level or performance version of the same car. I think one of the best examples is the GTO. Take a 1960s Pontiac Le Mans and turn it into a GTO. All you have to do is add a tri-power carb, a hood scoop hood, Rally 1 wheels, GTO rally gauges, and a few emblems, and it looks like a true GTO because the bodies were almost identical. Like the old saying goes, of the 32,000 GTOs made in 1964, 42,000 are still on the road. Another great example is the SS Anything upgrade. How many Camaros were converted to SS over the years, or Chevelles? To take it even further is going from a first-gen Camaro to a Yanko Camaro. That's the ultra-rare, ultra-high-performance dealer-made special model, of which only 50 were made. For those of you shopping for a car, beware of these fakes. Some car companies have reports that you can buy based on the VIN. That's why these original paperwork cars sell for so much more. Many clones were made decades ago and not really meant to be deceiving, and the current owner may not even know that the car is not legit. There are often visual cues, though, that could help determine if the car is legit. So do your homework and consider asking an online or social club for help. Some see clones as a threat to the integrity of the hobby. Others say the cars cannibalize original vehicles for parts, which leads to fewer real cars available to restore. Let me know where you stand on this. I can see it both ways. But clones do tend to be worth more money than base model cars of similar age and quality. A clone is different from a tribute car. We'll get to that too. Let's keep going. Gassers were generally built using cars from the 30s to 50s, but towards the end of the trend, there were many based on 60s muscle cars, so I'll briefly cover this type here. Plus, many of you may not know the origin of this trend. The name comes from the 50s drag racing scene that peaked in the late 50s and faded into the late 60s when rule changes allowed for other modifications. They were called gassers because these drag racing classes were required to run on street gas rather than race fuel or nitromethane. The rules back then stated that the cars in this class had to have a stock frame and wheelbase. As racers usually do, they looked for ways to make cars even faster within the limitations of the rules. Eventually, racers figured out that the cars would launch better if they could get much more weight over the rear tires. Racers soon discovered that raising the front suspension would shift weight to the rear for traction. Remember the street machines I just covered? Yeah, it's the opposite of that. Raising the front increases rear traction. To raise the front end, racers use leaf springs with solid axles. Many racers also move the engine as far back as possible, and rear axles were even lower to further improve weight transfer. These mods were great for traction on the drag strip, but awful for handling and pretty much anything having to do with street driving. The high center of gravity also made everything super sketchy. The raised front end also hurts visibility, so keep that in mind if you want to build one. Like the Pro Street look, the gassers have slicks in the back and skinnies in the front. The gasser trend eventually died out when funny cars took over the spotlight in the early 70s, late 60s. But the look is back today with many builders. No doubt it still is a super unique style. They have a savaged, uncivilized look. I personally don't get it so much. Let me know in the comments what you think. I do love the vintageness of it though, as this is a trend which originated 75 years ago. If you build one and want to race it, there are actually gasser associations around the country, so check that out. If you are enjoying this video, please hit the thumbs up. Number 10, the tribute car. Tribute is defined as an act or statement that is intended to show respect or admiration. So a tribute car is just that. It's a tribute to a certain type of car or era of cars, and is designed and built to look like a certain show car, a one-off prototype, or a race car. Like a Trans Am tribute, it's a replica, not an original Trans Am car. It may not even be all that close, but it's heavily inspired by a Trans Am race car. This 1969 Ford Talladega is a Benny Parsons tribute, and it's actually about 95% correct for a 1969 NASCAR Talladega. Here is a tribute street legal 1980s stock car. In some ways, a 69 Camaro SS with the 454 could be a tribute to a Camaro SS 396, which never came with the 454. It's not a clone because it never came that way. As Haggerty recently said, tribute cars let you drive and share historic moments that might otherwise be doomed to a quiet life of little more than a display, or magazine article or museum piece. So make a tribute, do with your car what you want. If every car was 100% showroom stock restoration, the world would be a very boring place. A driver is a classic that's unrestored and meant to be driven, even daily driven, with no worries about wear and tear or scratched paint. A solid driver often has tons of miles on the odometer and maybe not the original engine. It could have aftermarket wheels and some non-original interior bits too. Heck, probably lots of unoriginal parts. And maybe back in 1981, someone cut a hole in the roof to add a sunroof. Or maybe it's been painted 7 times, but it's still mostly complete, everything works, it's reliable, and you can drive it and enjoy it. And drivers are usually pretty affordable. But the best thing about a classic driver is it will likely never depreciate in value. You can slowly spend some money to update it back to original, or turn it into a pro touring car, or whatever. It should hold its value. Everyone knows a friend or neighbor who has a tinker box, or maybe it's you. It usually goes something like this. Hey Joe, what is your car again? I told you, man, it's a 1965 AMC Rambler Classic 770 convertible. It's gonna be an epic muscle car when I'm done. Wow, nice. How many of those did they even make? Not sure. Previous owner said they made 3 of them. That's why this thing is so cool. And how long have you had it? 20 years. What have you done so far? Well, not much. I'm still looking for parts. Of course, what happens with a super rare car that's in very bad shape is that parts are frustratingly impossible to find. Sales volumes of these types of cars were so low that no company is ever going to make reproduction parts, and the vehicle never gets finished. It sits in the driveway, yard, or barn, and then it's sold to the next tinkerer 20 years later. Sure, they get tinkered on from time to time, but mostly sit somewhat unloved and unfinished. I get it, not everyone wants a first-gen Camaro. They made 750,000 of them. But be careful when buying an AMC, International Scout, or even a low-volume Mercury or Plymouth or other brand like that. Of course, it can be done, and it can be super rewarding. Maybe it's the most rewarding because they are so rare. So I'm not saying give up on these cars, just be sure you know what you're getting into. If you don't have mad parts scavenging skills or an amazing fabrication garage to make your own parts, it may be best to pass on these types of cars. When some people build these, they end up having to buy 2 or 3 cars just to get the parts they need. Of course, if you can finish one, it's a rare, cool looking gem. Let us know in the comments what strange or unique model is lurking in your or your neighbor's garage, barn, or driveway. Choosing a muscle car can be difficult with so many styles out there. But fear not, because ɡild has created this infographic poster which could be just the thing you're looking for. Using common stereotypes, this poster can help you choose a muscle car. Different people have different needs and want different features. So the first step to finding the best muscle car for you is to identify what your priorities are. Will you be just cruising around town and going to local car shows? Do you care about performance? Will you ever want to drive it on a racetrack? Or do you just want a classic car to relive your youth? There are many possibilities, and this poster will answer all. Follow the poster and be honest with yourself. Or, for the best results, consider having a friend do the poster for you. This poster is standard poster size, 3 feet tall by 2 feet wide. Check out the link below in the description. Or, if you are watching this video in 2024, head on over to autoguild.com. It's another really cool poster to keep in your garage or shop. And this poster will certainly spark up interesting conversation and debate among your friends and visitors. You may even help a friend find their perfect card. Auto ɡild has many more great videos like this, and if you love this one, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching Auto ɡild, and good luck with your project.